That is. Again, we'd like to welcome everybody and thank you for coming to the house of the Lord today. Gary had a question for Delana, and I can't remember what the word was that she said. He wanted to know what that meant. But well, he makes up words to songs. He might as well make up words too, huh? I'm sure I'm not preaching to anybody but myself today, so y'all hold on. And the way my voice sounds this morning, I don't think it's going to be very long. But how many of y'all are busy? How many of us feel like we're way too busy? I want to talk about busyness, and then I want to kind of go to the other side of the spectrum as well. And I want to share these two kind of somewhat of a definition of what you'd say busyness and laziness is. And then I want to go into a little bit of scripture. Like I said, I don't think I'll be very long this morning, but let's just listen to this and see what you think and how well it fits us today. You know, I think these two words is one of the biggest issues that the church has today. Really, I mean, think about it. We're either so busy that we can't take time to stop and spend a little time with the Lord, or we're too lazy that we just won't do it. But I think that's a real issue that we have. But this is kind of what it says about busyness. It says we often operate under a false assumptions that busyness is productivity and rest is laziness. But all of us have experienced productive rest and unproductive activity. Anybody been a part of unproductive activity? The Bible points out that many benefits of being busy, such as earning a living, providing for your families, and advancing God's kingdom. But being too busy can damage our relationships with God and others. You know, I think about that as parents. How many of us have looked back and said, well, I was so busy when the kids were little that we didn't, you know, how much time should have I actually spent? But, you know, to me, as a father and a man, I think we have more that ideal that we got to make the living and not really spend so much time with the kids. And that busyness gets us in trouble, don't it? And we look back after they're grown and we're like, did we do enough or could we done more? I think we really probably could have done a lot more than we did, but we gotta find that balance, right? I mean, that's what our whole life is really about, is balance. Working together with God and all those things. But it goes on to say that it can also cause burnout and prevent us from focusing on our real priorities. As in anything we do, whether working or resting, learning to strike a balance between work, enjoyment, and rest will allow us to be healthier and more productive in all areas of life. That was what for busyness. Now this is laziness. Laziness and rest are quite different. You ever thought about that one? Laziness and rest is quite different. Rest after hard or strenuous work, or after productivity and progress is both needed and good. Everybody agree? We need to rest. But just to be lazy and idle, it's not worth a flip, is it? But avoiding work, resting instead of doing work, that needs to be done, is laziness. Taking shortcuts and ignoring responsibilities are also forms of laziness. Laziness is easy to slip into, just like any bad habit. We can acquire it real easy, can't we? We can get into that pattern and get everything out of balance. But giving in little by little turns into a lifestyle over time. God created people to live productive and rewarding lives. God tells us to be active, loving others, caring for our families, serving in our church and community, earning a living and helping the poor and the weak, feeding the hungry, being examples of His truth and telling others about Him. Laziness is wasteful, it's destructive, it's neglectful, and it's careless. It leads to nothing because it invests nothing. Lazy people often think that doing nothing feels good, but seeing our work will make a difference in our lives of others, and it brings deeper satisfaction. God made us to take pleasure in work, and it gives some scriptures there. Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verse 18 through 20, and Ephesians 2 and 10. But enthusiastic work for the Lord can bring blessings for our lives and for others. That's kind of contrasting definitions of busyness and laziness. But let's look and see what Scripture has to say about laziness. I want to start there to start with. But Proverbs 13 and 4 says, the soul of a lazy man desires and has nothing, but the soul of the diligent shall be made rich. Proverbs 15 and verse 19 says, the way of a lazy man is like a hedge of thorns, but the way of the upright is a highway. Contrast pretty different there, right? Proverbs 20 and 4 says, the lazy man will not plow because of winter, and he will beg during the harvest and have nothing. And then you get into the New Testament, 2 Thessalonians chapter 3 and 10 says, for even when we were with you, we commanded you this, if anyone will not work, neither shall he eat. Laziness is just doing nothing, right? And expecting. We got a world full of people today that don't want to do anything and expect somebody to take care of them. According to 2 Thessalonians, they're in trouble. And then another thing that we can say about it is desire without action produces frustration and futility. And the irony of laziness is that it heightens unmet desires, yet fails to motivate us to action. Right? How many of you got, like I spoke about last week, expectations, dreams, and plans, and that you want to see things happen, you want to do, but if you sit down in that chair and you don't never move, what's going to happen? Nothing. Right? We can't accomplish anything on that side of laziness. But kind of contrasting the other side of that is busyness. Let's kind of go that direction. I got a question here. Does God expect us to be busy all the time? Yes? No? Maybe? No? Why? Why would you say that? I got some scriptures, but we need rest, right? The Sabbath day. So, some scriptures to go along with that. Like I say, God made the world and everything in it in 6 days. And He rested on the 7th day. Did He need to rest? No. He wasn't overwhelmed. He wasn't so wore out that He couldn't do nothing. He done the 7th day rest as a pattern for us to see how to operate and how to walk in life and how to live. How many of us actually take one day a week and rest? There's a couple. Not many. Most of us burn the candle at both ends and hope everything don't fall apart in the middle, right? Yeah. I mean, it's a good thing for us to do. But, Jesus was discussing in Mark chapter 2, if you want to go there and look, verse 23 through 28. I'm just going to paraphrase it real quick because the way my voice feels at the moment, it's not going to last very long. But he's having a discussion with the Pharisees or the religious leaders about the Sabbath day. In verse 27, it says, "And he said to them, the Sabbath was made for man, not the man for the Sabbath." What does that mean? He instituted and he set that day aside for us to be able to rest. And what does that rest do? It regenerates our bodies. It allows us to be able to go again in the way that we should. How many have worked 7 days a week, 12 hours a day in shifts at some place? Anybody? A couple, 3, 4, right? How well does that work out for you months on end? It's not good. It starts to break you down physically in every which way, right? It's a lot. I mean, we did a lot of 7/12s when I worked in sheet metal. And we finally got it through their heads that you're a whole lot better off to do 6/10s. You're more productive with 6/10s than you are with 7/12s. For one thing, they spend the last 2 hours of that 12 hours on break most of the time anyway. But we got to understand how all that works, right? When we stay busy like that, too busy, we get unproductive. And that's what Jesus was trying to tell. Well, part of it was their legalism, that they were trying to get him in trouble, but he said that's not what God made it for. He didn't make the Sabbath for us. He made us. Didn't make us for the Sabbath. He made the Sabbath for us, right? To give us that opportunity to rest and relax. How many of you can remember years ago that on Sunday nobody mowed the yard? They didn't do nothing, right? It just didn't happen, right? Now there was days, and when you get into other situations like farming and different things like that, where the ox was in the ditch, you had to go get him out, right? Of course, Daddy always said that don't work all week to put him in the ditch so you can go Sunday and go get him out, right? I think that's kind of the mentality we have a lot of times. We work all week to put him in the ditch so we can go get him out on Sunday. But we got to understand that God doesn't expect us to be busy all the time. There's provisions and things that was made in Scripture for us to have rest. Psalms 23 and verse 2 says, He makes me to lie down in green pastures. What are you going to do when you lie down in a green pasture? Rest. He's talking about a shepherd. A shepherd knows that the sheep need a restful environment, right? What are we called? Sheep, right? You know, when we find ourselves bypassing healthy practices or godly opportunities because we're too busy, anybody have that experience sometimes, or probably more often than not? You know, we have issues with that. We just become too busy. Matthew chapter 11, verse 28 through and 29 says, Come to me, all. How many? All you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. It says, Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. You know, there are times when the Lord invites us to rest and to be refreshed in His care. And that's something that we need to learn in this busy, wonderful world that we live in today, this microwave age that we want everything and we want it now. You know, we've in that, I think we've programmed our children to understand or to think that everything's going to come right now. Right? You go to McDonald's and you order a Happy Meal and they give it to you. Right? They don't understand that it took your parents a few years to get that house and that cars that they're driving, all those things that they think just, we'll just go to the bank and get some more money. Yeah, right. They will give you more than you can pay back, but that busyness is what causes those things. We got dangers of having busy times, right? One of the next questions is, what are the dangers of busyness? You know, a life full of no time with God is actually an empty life, right? Look at people today that are running wide open. They're so busy they don't have time. They don't take time for God. They don't want to take time for God. What kind of life do you see in them? It's busyness, but it's empty. You look at these people that are multimillionaires that their lives are empty because they have nothing of God in them, right? They're still running and they're steadily searching. I want to, I've said it a lot of times. I feel like we have a God-sized place in us, if you would, like a puzzle that only God fits, right? How many of you put a puzzle together and you got a piece and I know it goes right here, right? How many of you tried to force it? But it don't work. That's the way people are doing with stuff, with drugs, with alcohol, with other things, with our work, finances. We try to stuff that stuff in a hole that only God's going to fill. And that busyness is a part of that. That's the reason why we end up getting in that place, in that position. But that's dangers of that busyness. You know, many of us can look back and realize that they've wasted time being busy with the wrong reasons and the wrong things. We've worked, I think as the old song said, you worked your fingers to the bone. What do you get? Bony fingers. Right? Y'all heard that one? That's an old one. But that's what we get instead of what we want. You know, if you go to Luke chapter 10, I'm not going to go there either, but Martha, she was distracted with the service of serving. Right? Was what she doing wrong? No. She was serving. She was doing a good thing. How many of us in the church have got distracted in the busyness of serving? And we've actually, in the busyness of serving, we've walked away from the Father. That one cuts deep, don't it? But, and you know, she even went to Jesus, paraphrasing, and said, hey, look at my sister. She's sitting here at your feet and she ain't doing nothing. I'm doing all the work. What did Jesus tell her? He said, she's doing a good thing. We got to watch how we get distracted with busyness instead of having that time with the Father and speaking and seeing Him and walking in with Him. You know, and another scripture that I think about is Luke chapter 12. In Luke chapter 12, there's a parable of the rich fool, right? He was about busyness. He got a super great harvest. Filled all his barns up overflowing. And what did he say? He said, I'll just tear down my barns and build bigger ones. And I'm going to sit on my hands and be lazy for the rest of my life, is really what he said. But what did God say? He said, this day, your life's going to be required of you, is really what he said. You're going to judgment. How well did that busyness turn out for him? His busyness of seeking. And, you know, I'm by no means saying we shouldn't make a living. We shouldn't do what we need to do. But there's a lot of things that we do that are really unnecessary. That we get so busy and so tied up in our hobbies, our other things. And like I said, I'm speaking to the choir this morning. We got to understand that those dangers of busyness will get us in trouble. Another question is, what should I continually be busy, or what should I busy myself with? What are some things that we should busy ourselves with? Psalms 71 in verse 8 says, let my mouth be filled with your praise. That's pretty simple, ain't it? That's something that we should always be doing. That's something that we continually should be busy with. And your glory all the day. We should continually be cultivating that relationship with the Father in prayer and worship and in studying and reading the Word. So, and then one of the things that kind of leads up into closing this out real quick is, how can I find rest from the busyness of life? How can you find that rest? What do we do? And I think really Jesus gave us one of the greatest examples of that, right? And I got a whole list of those scriptures where he done this, but he was always doing what? Did he go wait up in the middle of the crowd to find rest? Said he got away, right? Usually one of the problems I also see with that crowd is somebody's always speaking and talking into your ear, right? When you get away and you find Jesus and you find rest and you get alone with the Father, who you got to listen to? You want to listen to the Father, right? What did Jesus say he did? He didn't do anything unless the Father told him to. We got to watch about being that busyness. Mark chapter 1 and verse 35 says, very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up and left the house and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. Luke chapter 5 verse 16 says, but Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. Got to separate, ain't we? We got to find separation from the busyness and everything else and spend that time with the Father. Matthew 14 and verse 23 says, after he had dismissed them, he went up on a mountainside by himself to pray. Later that night, he was there alone. Luke 6 and 12 says, one of those days, Jesus went out to a mountain to pray and spent the night praying to God. And then one of the final ones here is Luke chapter 22, verse 39 and 41. Jesus went out as usual to the Mount of Olives, and his disciples followed him. On reaching the place, he said to them, pray that you will not fall into temptation. He withdrew about a stone's throw away beyond them, and he knelt and he prayed. We got to combat the busyness in our life, right? We got to find that balance. As Delana and Pam and then will come back, and we're prepared to worship again a moment for hearing the altar call. But, we got to find that busyness or that balance in the busyness. As long as we stay too busy, and I get it. Yesterday, for example, there's quite a fine group of us come together, and we done a lot of things here. We were busy for quite a while, and then I left in here and got in the truck and went to the hayfield and was there till about 8:30 when I finally got home last night. And then we went and picked up a truck because I got there again, the ox is in the ditch. I got hay on the ground that's got to get up today before the rain tomorrow. So when we still going to be busy. But we got to understand the difference between busyness and idleness and laziness, and we got to operate in God and find that balance. Walk in that balance. Let that change us. Let God change us. Instead of being busy all the time, let's go to the Father and let Him speak to us and through us. This morning as they come again to lead us in worship, if you need prayer, please come. I know it's not really been an evangelistic message this morning, but if the Lord's dealing with you, these altars is a great place, and we'd be glad to pray with you and to receive the Lord.